The Woods family moves into their new countryside home. Keira and Brian love the house, and their son Stephen is excited, but their daughter Ellie is unhappy about leaving her friends. She feels distant from her parents. The house has strange details, an old painting of a man with a raised finger and mysterious symbols above every door, except one with a pentagon. In the cellar, Ellie gets trapped when the door closes behind her. She panics as something approaches in the dark, but Brian quickly frees her with a key. That evening, Keira and Brian leave for an emergency meeting, asking Ellie to babysit Stephen. While on the phone, Ellie gets scared by Stephen, who wears a cloak and a creepy skull he found in a hidden compartment. Inside, Ellie discovers an old plaque saying "Solve et Coagula," a record player, and an abacus. Stephen says a witch once lived there and made a deal with the devil. Curious, they play the record, which recites an equation and starts counting. Later, a cold breeze from the cellar door cuts the power. Ellie calls her mom, who tells her to check the circuit breaker. Too afraid, Ellie refuses, so Keira tells her a little trick of hers she uses when she needs to clear her mind. She counts. Keira guides Ellie through the phone, encouraging her with each step she takes and count. Ellie should stop at 10, but instead, she closes her eyes and falls. Keira hears her counting up to 30 without responding, so she and Brian rush home. When they arrive, Ellie is nowhere to be found, so they call the police. A quick search of the woods turns up nothing. Since there's no sign of a crime and Ellie has run away before, the cops assume she's at a friend's house and tell them to wait. The next morning, neighbors help search the forest again, but still no sign of Ellie. Brian thinks she just ran away because she was upset, but Keira feels something is wrong. Ellie's voice sounded eerie while counting. The next day, Keira puts up missing person posters and forgets to pick up Stephen from school until the teacher calls. Once her son is with her, Keira goes to the police station to check for updates, but the detective doesn't have much news. They looked at security cameras at bus and train stations and called Ellie's friends, but there are no leads. They also haven't found Ellie's phone. The only thing the detective mentions is that Ellie was bullied and harassed on social media for some time. Keira feels guilty for not knowing this and asks forensics to check the cellar because she believes Ellie didn't run away. But the detective reminds her that since this isn't a criminal case, he can't do much. Back home, Keira notices words carved above the front door, "Solve et Coagula." Curious, she looks it up online while Stephen bounces his ball against the cellar door. She learns the phrase is linked to old alchemy and means dissolve and coagulate. The search also shows images of a 5-pointed star and a strange snake. Intrigued, Keira calls Stephen over. He joins her after dropping his ball near the cellar. Stephen tells her nothing unusual happened the night Ellie disappeared, except that they turned on the record player. Keira doesn't think much of it and goes back to checking Ellie's social media. She then discovers Ellie had secretly gotten an anarchist tattoo. Afterward, Keira decides to check the cellar again. She pauses to look at the pentagon above the door before stepping inside with a flashlight. This time, she sees Roman numbers on the steps and an equation at the end, just like the one on the record player. But the biggest shock comes when the tube's UV light shows scary faces painted on the wall. This finally makes the police call a forensics team. One of the men accidentally pushes Stephen's ball into the cellar. Sadly, the police don't find any other clues. The only thing they can say is that the painting has been there since the 1950s. When asked about the house's history, Brian says they don't know much. It used to belong to an old lady and they bought it for a very low price. At night, the family goes to sleep, but Keira wakes up when Stephen wets his bed. After changing his sheets, she goes to the bathroom and listens to her daughter's voice on the answering machine for comfort. Suddenly, she hears Ellie's voice counting from somewhere else, the sink pipes. Keira follows the sound and realizes it's coming from the cellar. When she enters, she accidentally kicks Stephen's ball, which rolls down the stairs. But the bouncing sound keeps going much longer than it should. Keira turns on the light and goes downstairs, but the ball is nowhere to be seen. The next morning, Brian wakes up and notices Keira never came back to bed. He looks for her and finds her staring at the symbols above the doors, holding a piece of paper with the equation from the cellar written on it. Brian understands what it feels like to be useless, but he doesn't think worrying about random symbols will help. Later, Keira calls her realtor to ask about the house's previous owner. Unfortunately, he only knows that she was the daughter of a famous academic who originally owned the house, but he promises to find out more. Keira takes pictures of the symbols above the doors before heading to work. She sends them to her secretary and asks her to look up their meaning while she attends a meeting. However, she is too distracted to focus and leaves as soon as she arrives. On her way out, her secretary stops her and tells her that the symbols are Hebrew and spell Leviathan, a sea creature from Jewish mythology. Keira picks up Stephen from school and finds him bleeding because he got into a fight after a classmate said Ellie was dead. At home, Keira searches online for information about Leviathan and realizes the drawings match the serpent she saw next to the Solve Et Coagula article. She then decides to try the record player. As the voice on the record starts counting, the abacus in the rec room begins moving on its own. Stephen also starts counting as he walks toward a hidden compartment, which opens by itself. Luckily, Keira hears him, quickly turns off the record player, and stops him. When she asks him what happened, Stephen doesn't seem to remember anything. Later, Keira looks at a painting of a man with his finger raised and discovers his name is John Featherston. She also notices that the Hebrew symbols are written on the painting. Keira looks up his name on the internet and learns that his whole family went missing in this house, except for the daughter. Just then, a cold breeze comes from under the cellar door and the power goes out. She hears Stephen's voice calling for help from behind the door, so she hurries to open it, but the lock is stuck and she can't find the key. When she looks through the keyhole, she sees an animal's eye staring back at her. She jumps back and suddenly sees the real Stephen in the hallway. At that moment, the cellar door opens by itself, and the power comes back. The key was on the floor the whole time. Keira picks it up and hangs it back before using her phone's flashlight to enter the cellar. As soon as she steps inside, the door shuts behind her. She calls Stephen for help, but he is too short to reach the key, so he goes to find a chair. While waiting, Keira looks around the cellar and accidentally drops her phone. She then hears heavy breathing, and something starts moving closer to her. A creature begins climbing the stairs, and Keira panics, trying to escape. Luckily, Brian arrives just in time to get her out. Later, Keira tells Brian that she felt something down there, and that her phone is missing. She also mentions that the Featherston family disappeared just like Ellie, but Brian thinks she is imagining things. To help her feel better, Brian goes into the cellar to find her phone, but all he finds is a ball of hair. The next day, Keira visits the National College of Mathematics, where there is a Featherston wing, to meet Dr. Remy Fournette, a brilliant mathematician. Keira hands him a piece of paper with the equation from the cellar. When he reads it out loud, the lights flicker for a moment. As he works on solving the equation, Fournette tells her more about Featherston. This used to be his office, and he was a colleague of Erwin Schrödinger, the scientist famous for the Schrödinger's cat experiment, where a cat in a box is both alive and dead at the same time. Featherston worked closely with Schrödinger until his son became ill. After that, he disappeared from the academic world. No one knows what happened to him except his daughter, Rose, the woman who sold the house to Keira. However, Rose never talks about it because she never fully recovered from whatever happened. Fournette creates a visual representation of the equation and thinks it might relate to other dimensions. However, it is more complicated than anything he has seen before. He tells Keira he will need time to study it and promises to call her once he has results. Later, Keira buys a new phone. The moment she turns it on, she gets a call from Fournette. He says he has been trying to reach her, but every time he called, a strange voice answered, only counting numbers. Fournette then tells her he spoke to a colleague about the equation. The colleague believes it is linked to a type of mathematics created by alchemists in the 12th century. It looks like an incomplete sequence or an unfinished incantation and is definitely connected to other dimensions. This same colleague had seen a similar equation in a house in Belgium, where a family mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, Brian comes to check on Keira, leaving Stephen alone in the rec room. The abacus in the room starts moving on its own again. Keira shows Brian what she has found out. Leviathan is a serpent of the abyss, and the house is called Zeos, which is the Greek word for the void before time, also known as the abyss. Brian thinks she is worrying too much about the decorations. To distract her, he tries to break the equation plaque with a hammer, but it doesn't even make a scratch. Suddenly, the record player starts playing, and Stephen moves toward a hidden compartment. Inside, he finds Ellie, who looks pale and has strange symbols carved on her face. She keeps counting. Stephen yells for help, but by the time his parents arrive, the record player is stuck on the number 10, and Ellie is gone, only her phone is left behind. The next day, Keira gets a call from her realtor about where to find Featherston's daughter. She drives to a nursing home and finds an elderly woman named Rose in a wheelchair inside the chapel. A nurse warns Keira that Rose doesn't talk much anymore. Still, Keira tells her about Ellie and asks for help. After a moment, Rose writes Leviathan, but explains that this isn't the demon's real name. It is one of the 7 princes of hell, and her father summoned it to heal her sick brother. The ritual isn't just in the cellar, it covers the entire house. On her way back, Keira tries to call Fournette, but all she hears is static and a voice counting. Meanwhile, Brian does his own research and discovers that putting the triangles together with the pentagon forms a 5-pointed star. This star, along with the symbols, represents the demon Baphomet, the gatekeeper of hell. In an old picture, Baphomet makes the same hand sign as Featherston in the painting, and his arms bear the words, Solve Coagula. When Keira arrives and sees Brian's findings, she realizes Rose was right. The entire house was built around the ritual. She turns on the record player, explaining that the equation might be the key to opening the gate. At the same time, Stephen loses control of his drone and follows it into the cellar, counting each step as he goes. Baphomet is waiting at the bottom, and Stephen screams as the lights go out. His parents rush after him but only find the drone. They search the house but can't find him. Suddenly, Stephen's ball bounces down the stairs, and they hear a voice counting. Following the sound, they see Stephen about to enter a hidden space. They grab him and realize he has a high fever. While Brian goes to get water, Keira tries to remove Stephen's shirt and sees a star carved on his chest. Stephen suddenly says he remembers riding a horned creature, then starts counting again. Keira looks for Brian and finds him in another room, also counting. When he reaches 0, he says, "It's here." The cellar door opens by itself, and a strong wind rushes out. Baphomet's footsteps echo as it comes up. Keira hides in another room, but the demon finds her, so she runs into the cellar with a flashlight. The stairs stretch longer and she sees a door at the end. She runs toward it, hoping to escape. At the bottom, she hides behind a wall and watches Baphomet leave through the door. Then she explores the room and finds a tunnel. When she goes through it, she is shocked to see a vast space filled with lost souls walking in a line and counting. Among them is Ellie, whom Keira recognizes by her tattoo. She grabs her daughter and rushes back to the stairs. Baphomet is chasing them, and in the rush, she drops the flashlight. When they reach the house, the power is back. Keira quickly shuts the cellar door. The family is safe and she tells them they should leave. But as she nears the entrance, she sees her flashlight on the floor. Then, her family starts counting. Keira opens the door and sees the long stairs again. Soon, she starts counting too, and the house is no longer in the woods, it stands alone in a barren land.